Okay, we're recording. All right. Welcome, everybody. Going to have a little conversation this afternoon. A lot of you people will know who Jim Tucker is. I've known Jim for many years and am somewhat familiar with his background in pro wrestling after years of talking to him about it. But I know a lot of people who log in here to the site and who are not from the Carolinas and stuff probably are not real familiar with Jim, and we just wanted to put together a Shooting with the Carolina Outlaws program, and we thought Jim would be a great guy to start that with. So welcome, Jim. I appreciate you chatting with me for a little while.
Always a pleasure, Ben. Always a pleasure.
Just a little bit of background on you to get us started here. You grew up in Morganton, North Carolina. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Born and raised.
Born and raised and bred.
And when you were growing up, were you always a wrestling fan? Were you a wrestling fan as a kid, or?
Yes, I was a great wrestling fan as a child, and used to watch the old Jim Crockett promotions that come on when you had the tag team of Johnny Weaver and George Becker and Billy Two Rivers, George Two-Ton Harris, just to name a few, and Johnny Weaver and George Becker were sort of, I guess you call my wrestling idols in that era.
And what for the people who don't know, what were those years? Was that probably the
That was the early '60s, probably. I'm just saying,
sure.
Maybe 1959, early '60s. They were old black and white. I think they come on for a half hour for a while, and then they upped it to an hour, if I'm not mistaken. But guys like that, managers like the General Homer Oldell, Mr. Fuji, some of the guys like that, which were the top heels in the area at that time.
So you watched basically Jim Crockett promotions back then, and were there?
Yes, that's about the only thing that you could get. I think you could get about 3 or 4 stations then, often just rabbit ears or outside antenna, and with an old black and white TV. So that was primarily the Saturday morning activities besides your Saturday morning westerns, and then everybody got ready for wrestling.
Sure. And were there outlaw groups back then that ran opposition to Crockett, or that were in the area?
They were some outlaw groups. I can't really know what some of the names were, but they were some, and from my understanding, I went with my grandparents to one, and, they drove decent crowds at that time, when you had $2 ringside admission, and but none could draw the crowds like Jim Crockett Promotions could in this area, because they were promoted by in this area by the chapter JCs in Morganton, and always drew a real good house in this area.
Did you go to a lot of the live shows when you were a kid?
I went to some, not that many, just once in a while we got a treat. My parents give us a treat. We either go to the drive-in theater, go out for dinner, and then the drive-in theater, which is next to the old fish camp where we used to go. Or if wrestling was in town, my dad wasn't too much on the wrestling. My mother watched it some, but my grandparents were avid wrestling fans, and I usually went with them to some of the live events.
That's good. And where did they hold those, around Morganton, or where you went?
In the summertime, they would hold them outside at the old Morganton High School football field, and then usually in the winter months they would be held at the Morganton College Street Recreation Center, and at one period they were held at the old National Guard Armory, which was over there next to where the old Morgan High School used to be, which is no more. They're putting something else up there.
Wow. So the College Street's been there for a long, long time then.
Yes, it's been there for a number of years.
Right. And So how did you jump? I guess you were a kid and you went to high school and you played other sports. I'm sure you played. Did you play? I think you played baseball or football.
Yes, I played baseball and had a chance to go play for a Philadelphia Phillies farm team. Went to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But as young out of high school and everything, we all get a little wild hair around us, and so I did that for just a little bit, and then come back home. I guess I was homesick, and then that's shortly after then is when the wrestling I got more interested into the wrestling field.
So the Fort Lauderdale baseball juncture, that was back in the days when you played ball at night and they got you a job. You had to work in the daytime, wasn't it?
Right. Right. I think about $1.65 an hour. I think, or $1.65 an hour was the minimum wage or whatever they started you off at that time.
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. I didn't know you played professionally. What position did you play, Jim?
I played catcher. I hind catched,
okay.
And then once in a while I was in the outfield, center field, between center field and right field. But primarily my job was catching. And
so you came home, got a little homesick. You got home, and how did you go about getting involved in wrestling? How did that transpire?
One Saturday night, IWA Wrestling, International Wrestling Association, used to come on at WXII TV 12 in Winston-Salem.
Right.
Used to come on at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, or you might want to call it Sunday morning. And they run an advertisement on there about if you'd like a chance in the professional wrestling field, and you feel that you have what it takes, call this number. So I called the number on that Monday, and I talked to Johnny Powers.
Right.
Which he was a big babyface opposition to the NWA at that time. And so he had a schedule to meet down at Greensboro at the old Triad Arena. And they had a ring, Triad Arena, I think, was an ice skating ring, or they might have had some semi-pro hockey or something like that. And they had a ring set up in the back of the building, which was open, and it was there were no heat. So we're talking, this was in the fall of the year, and it was pretty cool. And
would that have been 75 or 76, Jim?
I think that would have been more or less later, 76.
Okay.
Late part of 76.
So it was after Powers had taken over the IWA, and they were running pretty much regional.
Right.
Okay.
And they were a bunch of, I think at that time it was about 15 or 20 of us on a Tuesday night. They had it on Tuesday and Thursday night. And some of the guys that were there to assist Johnny Powers was Brower, Bulldog Brower was there, and
wow.
There were a couple more I can't remember at that time. Ed Fury,
right,
Captain of the Soul Patrol, as they call him, Big Ed Fury. He was there as one of them, which Ed turned out to be a real good friend of mine later on down through the years.
Sure. Who were some of the other guys? Anybody we'd recognize that showed up to train with you?
No, not right off this hand, because after a couple of weeks, some of the guys, they got weeded out because I don't think they thought, well, this is not for me.
Right.
And after a few weeks going down there, I come back, was driving back and forth to Morganton.
Right.
And met up with Alan Goforth, which was Danny Doyle.
Okay.
One half of the Doyle brothers.
Sure.
And David Penley, which was Bobby Bodall. And these guys were working out down at the old Drexel Community Center, which is the R.O. Huffman Center now, in the loft. They had it was a cement floor and had judo mats up there.
Right.
So I got invited to come down there and started working out with those guys. And then it went on for months, before you even had any ring activity.
Sure.
And then they had a show one Saturday at the Drexel Community Center, and I met up with an independent promoter, which was Charlie Babb.
Okay.
And
how long did you train, Jim, before you actually got in a match?
I guess it was about 7 or 8 months before you even got in a match, because then training was you learn wrestling holds.
Right.
And they might give you 2 or 3 wrestling holds. You got those down pat, then you would add one to your vocabulary every week. And then other things as far as taking a bump, or for those who don't know what taking a bump is learning how to fall. But you know, you can still get hurt even though you know how to fall. But
sure.
And it takes several months before you could even get inside a ring.
Right.
And usually they'd start you off refereeing. But in this case, I got to participate in a match. Okay.
And when you were training with Powers, what was a typical training day like, just for the young guys who?
A typical training day was to start off with, you got loosened up, then you did some calisthenics for about 15 minutes. And then they got in the room, taught you the referee's position, which is a tie-up,
right.
lock-up. And then from there, a lock-up to either a headlock or a standing wrist lock. And after we trained, I guess, in one night for about 2 hours. And then after that pool of guys that we had, like 15 to 20 guys, everybody would go back and see if you remembered how to tie up, and then from that tie-up position go into a headlock or a standing wrist lock.
Right.
And then after, you know, like I say, you learned those, then you would add another hole or two, and then later on down the road they'd teach you how to bump or take a fall.
Sure.
Powers used to give us over-the-head suplexes across the ring.
Right.
And that was a little bit scary because he was a pretty tall individual,
right.
and a strong individual. But you know, after getting thrown around in the ring a little bit to see if you could take it, you would get sore. And I don't think the soreness ever did go away, but you know, heck, we loved it. Those who kept on coming back, we loved it because you know, we had it in our blood that we wanted to make it on top and wanted to be where some of these other guys were, like your Harley races, your Rip Halt, your Sweet Hansons, guys like that.
Sure. So how, you know, I've heard horror stories about people training, the Anderson brothers training and running people to death and things like that. So it wasn't really like that. So they
well, I don't know as far as Anderson Brothers how the NWA did their part at that time, but primarily, give you an example. One of the local independence groups around here, this guy that I know, young guy, he told me he'd been working out with them. And I said he had his first match coming up. And I said, well, how long have you been training? He said, well, they've had me training for a month, and they told me I was ready. Well, I'm going to tell you something. You don't train for a month and then somebody tells you you're ready to get in there for your first match, because it's just like when you start driving an automobile, you have to take driver's training. They just don't stick you in a car the first time. All right, you know how to crank it up. Here's your license. You know,
sure.
You have to go through steps. And he asked me, he says, well, some of the groups that you've been with, how long do you train? I said, well, before you even got inside a ring, it would be probably 6 months, at least, before you could even have a taste of your first match. And then you would get in there with somebody that knew what they were doing.
Right.
And some of these guys out here are not throwing anything off on them. Some of them don't know what they're doing.
Sure.
And, you know, a person can get hurt. You're going to get hurt. You know, you can get hurt walking out to your car to get in your car. But if you don't know what you're doing, when it comes to wrestling, you know, you can get seriously hurt or paralyzed. It's happened before.
Sure. So was there a charge for training with Powers, or did they pretty much just?
Well, he come up after about 4 weeks, and the charge for that time, for those who were left, seemed like that neighborhood was $2,000.
Oh wow!
Now
so
you're talking.
So he kind of got you hooked, and then hit you with the $2,000 when you.
Yeah,
we figured the guys that were still there loved it and had it in their heart.
Yeah, he gives you a taste of the honey, just enough to keep you coming back before the kill. Now, he also, they had payment plans if you wanted, and he split it up where, you know, where you could make a payment plans on it, you know.
Sure.
And but he also would tell you, he told us, he said, now there's no guarantees. But and I think the payment plan at that time was like, seemed like it was about $50 a week, which, you know, you're talking fall of 76, first part of 77, $50. A lot of people didn't clear $100, maybe if you were lucky, in a 40-hour-a-week job.
Right. Yeah, $2,000 is still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money in 1976.
Right. But you figure if you had 10 guys at $2,000 a piece, that's $20,000, and then you keep them and work them through I think his program was like a 4-month type of a program.
Right. That's great. But, so that's about the time you left, and then you started working out with the Doyle brothers.
Well, I left a little bit sooner than that. I guess I was there about 3.5 months, and then I got hooked up with the Doyle brothers, and I can't remember. There's a couple others down there at that time that we were going up there. It'd be 100 degrees out, you know, outside, for instance, and then you're going up that walk at the old Drexel Community Center, and it'd be 20 degrees, 30 degrees hotter up there, but we'd be up there taking bumps on old judo mat and learning how to do this and do that. And but we didn't pay it a bit more attention than opening up the door of your house. It's just something we loved doing.
Sure. So you met Powers and Brower and worked out with a lot of those guys early on,
right.
Then.
Ed Fury, also Johnny Condori. He was one of them there, yeah, and early. And then I had some IWA shots also, but I was on the undercard doing jobs, and I think at one period, you know, my pay was right then was like $50, and man, being in there with some of those guys at that time, Luthez, Nelson Royal, you know, I'd have probably done it for nothing.
Sure.
But you know, when you're getting anywhere from $40 or $50, you know, and going out there 10 minutes, of course, you know, you were doing jobs, but you know, you got to start somewhere.
Sure. Well, that's invaluable experience when you get to work with guys like Nelson Royal and I believe you said you had worked with the Mongols a little bit.
Right. Guido and Bolo I have teamed up with both of them, and I learned a lot from those guys. Bulldog Brower, I teamed up with him, and then down through the years, we met up with Brute Bernard, the Wild Canadian, as they call him, and got a chance to team up with him. And Brute, you might as well say, took me under his tutelage, and he taught me a lot.
Right. Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, so you just to kind of keep it in, and we don't really have to keep it in order if we don't want to, I don't guess. But if when you started working out with the Doyle brothers, and that's when you met Charlie Babb, and Charlie was the promoter who was promoting the shows at Drexel.
Yes, he was a promoter. It was promoting the shows at Drexel at that time.
Well, wasn't he working for Powers? Was he working for Powers when you were down there working out? Didn't he?
Yeah,
because Charlie did work for Powers, I think.
I think he had left, or they'd give him his walking papers 1 to 2, but he had just left because he wasn't down there at that time. Right.
Okay. So he was out trying to do his own thing then.
Right, he was out trying to do his own thing, and you know, he was doing a pretty good job at it.
Sure.
You know, running little shows without TV and just advertising with newspaper, radio, and posters. And you know, when you're drawing on the average a little independent promotion like him or promoter, 300 people, you know, heck, you're doing good.
So who do you remember who your first opponent was?
Yes, I do. I met up with Tommy Fuller.
Right.
A lot of people think that Charlie gave me my first match, but it was Tommy Fuller and Gene Tucker. Tommy wanted me to go. They'd run wrestling on Friday night at Drexel, and he said, asked me if I'd like a ride to Walhalla, South Carolina. They had a match down there.
Right.
And so, yeah. So he said, well, take your gear. Said, you know, if somebody doesn't show up, you might be able to work. So we got down there, and Tommy introduced me to, I can't think of the guy's last name, but his first name was Cleo, and he worked under a mask. I think he worked as a spoiler. Of course, everybody worked as a spoiler or Mr. X. And Tommy Fuller's partner didn't show up that night, so I had to work babyface with Tommy Fuller against Gene Tucker and Cleo.
Okay.
And that was my first match, my first match that I got color in, and had butterflies like you wouldn't believe.
And what did the crowd look like?
The crowd at that time, they had about, I guess, in the neighborhood of about 250 people.
That's awesome. And was that the first time you had met Gene Tucker?
That's the first time I'd met Gene Tucker.
And whose idea was it to form the Tucker Brothers?
That was Charlie Babb's.
Charlie Babb came up with the Tucker Brothers.
Yeah.
And there was three of you.
Yeah. Start off with it was Gene and Larry.
Right.
And then Larry couldn't make it one night to Drexel, so I'd been working as Jim Starr as babyface, which I think you've got some of those pictures on Classic Wrestling. But
I do.
And he said, I want you to go out there and work heel with Gene. He said, you're going to be a Tucker brother. And I said, we're just going to call you Jim Tucker. I said, all right. And Gene told me, says, just follow me, listen to me, everything be all right. And it was against Tommy. Not take it back, it was against the Doyle brothers.
Now, was Gene, I'm taking it, he was experienced at that point?
Right, he was. He's experienced at that point.
Okay. And who broke him in? Do you know, Jim?
Not right offhand, I don't. I think Gene had done some stuff for another bunch out of Georgia at that time.
Okay.
But I can't remember who. It might have been Charlie, but I really can't say for sure.
Okay. So that's when the Tucker Brothers were born.
That's right. That's when the Tucker Brothers was born.
Well, I can remember seeing Charlie's TV when I was a little boy. Late night, I'd stay up late at night on Friday or Saturday night whenever it come. And of course, you'd come home for 5 or 6 weeks, and then you'd lose it, and then you'd have to find it again. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, you'd find it on a different night at a different time on a different station. And I remember the Tucker Brothers and the Doyle Brothers and the Crusaders and Eclipso.
Right.
A lot of those.
I think it was Pink Graham.
Pink Graham, that's right, exactly.
Joe Wilson.
Yeah.
And guys like that, which
Eddie Dean.
And Eddie Dean, Big Dave Foster, which I spoke to Dave not long ago on the internet.
Right. But so you got going there, and you're training at the Drexel Community Center, and you meet Charlie, and so things go along pretty good there. You start to get booked a little bit and making a little money.
Well, we were getting booked started off, or I was getting booked started off, and I guess it's called paying your dues. Some nights you would travel, like I traveled all the way down to the eastern part of the state of North Carolina, and I think they drew 20 people.
Oh, my.
I forget who it was for. I didn't get the first dime, but, there again, it was wrestling, I was booked, and I was going.
And you were getting experience, that's right.
It's like this, if we got there, we'd worry about getting back some after the match was over with. But, that's the way you would hit and miss. A lot of them, you didn't draw these 200 and 300 people every weekend, because some nights you'd be lucky if you draw 20 people.
Sure. So was Charlie? Was it AWF at that point, or did that come along later?
Well, it was used to be NWF, National Wrestling Federation. Charlie thought that if he get close to the NWA, which is National Wrestling Alliance, that he might be able to fool some people to come in. Well, this is National Wrestling Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, get them in the door to buy that ticket.
Sure.
But he always put NWF. AWF come later on down the road.
Okay. And how'd you meet Brute Bernard? How did that all start out?
Brute Bernard, it started off when a guy by the name of Johnny Hunter.
Right.
Give me a call. He'd got my number through one of the guys and wanted to know if I wanted to come work some for him. And I said, sure. And so I got there at night. Johnny was booking some of these guys, undercard guys. Well, they were top names. Had been with Crockett's Tony Romano, El Gaucho, guys like that. And he had Brute Bernard that night. And he said, Jim, I want you to work with Brute in a tag team against, it was Johnny Hunter and Buck Forrest, which was called this Crusader.
Right.
And
so Buck was the original Crusader here in the Carolinas?
Buck Forrest, he lived, I think he lived in South Carolina at that time. I talked to Buck's daughter every now and then, but
right. He
was one of the Crusaders. Gene Ligon worked as one of the Crusaders. But this was Buck Forrest at that time, and and that was one of the first matches. Of course, Johnny Hunter, he was a good man. I had a lot of respect for him. And that's where I met up with Brute. And, you know, the tag team clicked, and he says, hey, I got this other show I'm going to run. I think it was at Cowpens or China Grove, somewhere down there. And so he wanted me and Brute together. And so from there on, he started booking us, and then I don't know whether these independent promoters liked what they saw, and they started booking.
And, you know, I think we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the AWF TV that we posted on the Facebook site, and it seemed like the Tucker brothers were there, but it seemed like you were doing more with Brower and Brute than you were doing with the Tucker brothers.
Yeah, the Brute and myself at that time were drawing as an independent, as, you know, heels at that time.
Right.
And then Charlie was able to get Brower to come in for some shots, and then he decided he worked into a 6-man, which pitted Bulldog Brower, Brute Bernard, and myself.
Right.
You know, against the Crusaders 1 and 2, which was Buck Forrest and Dale Stepp.
Right.
And Chief J. Eagle, and which was a good thing. And then later on, he brought General Homer O'Dell in to manage us.
Right.
So, but he runs some shows like that, and Gene and I, we still did things together as a tag team.
Yeah.
But, you know, Charlie's philosophy was, well, let's try this and see how this gets over, and if it doesn't, we'll go back to the old way.
Right.
You know, so...
well, it's like we were talking, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of continuity in the booking, and that could have been the guys. You know, I know how that goes. You get something going with somebody, and then they, you know, they do something crazy, or they don't show up, or... Yeah.
That's, I mean... It's that way today. It was that way back then also.
Right, right.
If somebody thought that they could make an extra dollar by going with this other promotion, that's where they would, even though they were booked for such and such, they would go work for promotion B just to get that extra dollar.
Right. Now, I know you've told me this story before, but see if you can tell everybody the peanut story with Charlie Babb.
Oh, Lord, Charlie was real superstitious, and he believed he didn't want you eating peanuts in his automobile, which I love roasted peanuts in the shell. And we were going down the road to a town that he had booked, and it was going down 85 right outside of Atlanta. and I had me a soft drink, and I had me some peanuts because we stopped and got something to munch on until we got where we were going. Then we were going to eat, and I didn't have no place to put my shells, so I was laying them down in the floorboard.
Right.
And he had a fit. He said, "Don't do that." I said, "Well, I'm going to get them up." And he says, "That is bad luck." I said, "Bad luck?" And he said, "Yes, it's bad luck. We might get pulled over, or anything can happen." And I got to laughing at him. I started to eat more, and I started throwing the shells over on him, the peanut shells, and I thought he was going to wreck us on the I-85 down there in Atlanta. He pulled the car over the side of the road and got out and come over there and started cleaning the peanut shells and everything, throwing them out. He says, "Do not eat no more peanuts in here." And he was just as, he didn't like bees. And there's an old dead wasp in there I found in the windshield. You know how they get when they can't get out and they'll die. I got one, I threw it over on him, and he ran off the road into the ditch. And, yeah, he was real superstitious when it come to eating peanuts in his car, or he didn't like bees. I don't know if anybody does like bees, but he really didn't like bees. But he was a character. He was real superstitious.
How about that? And tell me a little bit now. I know Charlie did the AWF here in the Carolinas, and he had a money person here, but he also and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but y'all also he found a money mark in Oklahoma too, didn't he? And also maybe Mississippi. Was it Mississippi?
Yeah, in Tupelo, Mississippi, and he ran up there. It was two ladies, elderly women. Well, they wasn't elderly women, but one was married, and her husband had a chain of pawn shops, and the other one, her husband was deceased and left her a big contracting business. They call it now flipping houses, buying and fixing houses up and flipping them themselves. That's what she did. And these ladies were real good people, and they were also good wrestling fans.
Right. So he pretty much walked people through that. People that aren't familiar with the whole money mark thing. What happened? So you went to Mississippi and you found Charlie was running. It was after here in the Carolinas or before here in the Carolinas?
It was after here in the Carolinas.
Because y'all used some of the same TV, didn't you? He took the TV down there and ran it down there?
Right. You could take, at that time, you could go in with a wrestling show and do a barter deal with TV. In other words, a trade out. You run my show and I'll give you so much of advertising.
Right.
And he run some of those shows down there until he got some money built up, extra money built up on himself, and also to sell his product to his angels, which, in other words, were called money people.
Sure.
And then he was sort of a strange character, and I think the world of him, and God rest his soul, but he'd get a good thing going in an area, and then and when you're drawing good houses and making money, and then all of a sudden, I guess he liked to play big shot, and then he'd drop it. Then when he'd get broke again, he'd go out and try to find another investor.
Right. And he was pretty good at that, wasn't he?
He was. I'll give him an A+ on that. He was real good. He could sniff them out just like an old coon dog could go tree a coon. He knew how to do them.
So when you went to Mississippi, who were some of the people that went down there and worked?
Well, he believed in bringing new guys to a territory instead of using local guys. He brought...
That's smart. A lot of independent promoters could benefit a whole bunch from that.
He would bring guys from this area up there to Mississippi that people didn't know, but also some of them they did know. He had Brower up there. He had Chief Black Eagle up there. Of course, a lot of people knew some of those guys up there, and but bring some of his people from the Carolinas up there in Mississippi.
Right.
That way he knew what he would have. He could book a series of towns up there and bring his guys up there, and he knew that they were going to be right there with him instead of booking local talent, which would probably work for every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and you didn't know what you were getting, which was smart. You know, he knew what he was bringing up there and what guys he had and what he could do with them.
So when you were in Mississippi, tell everybody what a typical week might be like. Now, you were still living in Morganton, North Carolina.
Well,
had a
at
wife.
That time I was living in South Carolina.
Oh, you was living in South Carolina. Were you married yet?
Yes, I
Okay.
had got married.
Okay.
And the typical week was Charlie was running 3 nights a week up there, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
Right.
And believe it or not, 2 nights out of those 3, he'd probably draw decent houses.
Sure.
And and then some weeks he would go out and he would book towns, and then he would see what towns would draw and the ones that would not draw.
Right.
And then he would sort of stick to the ones that were drawing.
Well, that's smart.
And and then
So you'd leave South Carolina on a Wednesday and drive to...
I'd come back on usually on a Sunday, and usually on a Tuesday or a Wednesday I'd leave back out to go back up there.
So you drive back and forth. And gas at that point was... What year was that, Jim?
I'm thinking it was in the neighborhood of about 82, somewhere around there, 81, 82, somewhere in that neighborhood. Maybe 83, because I had done some shots with the Georgia Championship Wrestling, and it was shortly after then.
So you had 5 or 6 years under your belt at that point.
Right.
Now, how about Oklahoma? When was that?
Oklahoma was, I believe it was in 1985.
Yeah. So that was even further.
We had a tour of the whole state of Oklahoma at that time, and drew some good houses.
And that was another money mark?
Yes, that was. That was a real good market out there. You had Bill Watts, I think it was his name, that run up in that area.
Sure.
But it was a good money market in that area.
Yep. And that was another investor that Charlie sniffed out.
Right. That was another investor. He, when it come to that, it's like he had a golden horseshoe in his pocket, but he didn't know how to use that golden horseshoe.
I've been looking for money since the year 2000. I ain't found none yet.
Well, I know what you mean there, but that was a good market at that time up there, and they run a lot of outside shows, which people's got away from the outside shows now.
Right. But now, who went there with you? Who did you travel with anybody? It was the Tucker brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, the Tucker brothers were up there. I think one of the Mongols were, of course, Brower was. Charlie would try to get some talent in there that people had heard of.
Sure.
It probably cost him a little bit, but and then there again he would bring his guys from the Carolinas up there to mix in with these top guys to sort of get them some recognition, and so it'd be different people that some of the people up there haven't saw before, and in which I think that helped a lot because you keep going to the same ice cream parlor week after week, you get tired of all the flavors because you know what they got.
Right.
And you want something new, and so he had some new guys up there that people hadn't saw before, and it worked out, good. I know he had the Mongols up there. He had Brower up there, and Nelson Royal. Even he did some things up there. And the list goes on.
How? That's a long ride to Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's real pretty country. Mickey Fields, a young gentleman that I had trained at that time, or helped train. He went up there and with us. He rode out there with me a few times,
Right.
I don't know whatever happened to him, but it was a good ride. But it was also there again. It was something different, you know. You stay in the area too long, and you get tired of it, and you're ready for some new scenery. And of course, some of those guys that would drive from the Carolinas to Oklahoma, you know, we didn't mind it. You know, as there again, we loved it. We loved the wrestling business, and you know, somebody wanted us to come to Egypt. We tried to find somebody to get there, you know, but we didn't mind it at all. You know, we didn't think twice. You know, they say, "Well, we want you to come tomorrow and be up there by 8 o'clock." You know, you'd hit the road.
And what did a typical money week look like? So you're living in Oklahoma. Probably got a room sharing with 2 or 3 guys, 4 guys maybe.
Right. The rooms, they get rooms with 2 double beds, and we'd share the room like that. Before, it was usually in a room. And a typical money week for me and say the Tuckers, we were knocking down about for the 3 nights about $500. Plus, now we got our trance and we got motels, so the only thing we had to pay for is what we eat.
So y'all were making for 3 nights about $500 a piece.
Right.
That's awesome, and that was probably more than you were making in a real job.
Right. It was. It was way deal more.
Yeah, I bet. And who were some of your craziest roommates when you were in Mississippi or Oklahoma or traveling around?
Believe it or not, Chief Black Eagle was one of them.
Chief Black Eagle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chief Black Eagle, David Upchurch, which was Dr. Cato. He was a real weirdo.
Yeah.
But Chief Black Eagle was a real good roommate, you know. He was a real good person. Now, he was a prankster, but, you know, you're having breakfast and then you turn your head, he just typed to put Texas Pete in your coffee.
Right.
Chief Black Eagle was a real good one.
Yeah.
Of course, Gene, you can't take nothing away from Gene and Larry, because they were all timed up to something.
And how about what's some of the most memorable feuds you can remember for the Tucker brothers when y'all were working?
Well, we were in Logan, West Virginia, and they'd split me and Gene up there. For what reason, I don't know. I can't remember. They'd stuck me and me and Rick Starr,
right.
Beautiful Rick Starr, against the one-man gang, which at that time was George Gray.
Right.
That's his real name. And I forget who his partner was, but Playboy Barry Hill was managing us. And we had a tremendous house there that night at the Phil House. And I'm going to tell you, when somebody like the gang picks you up and walks up for a body slam and just holds you straight up in the air and walks around, it's a long way up there and a long way down.
Right.
But we've had some real good matches up there.
Well, that's another thing that a lot of people probably don't know. Charlie broke one-man gang in, didn't he?
Well, it was Charlie booked him a lot.
Right.
But I think Jerry Eagle was one of the main ones that had really broke in.
That trained him? Yeah?
Yeah.
And
he used to live, one-man gang used to live in Moore, South Carolina, which was a little community outside Spartanburg.
I know you said
y'all used to pick him up. Me and the wife used to go pick him up on Sundays and go eat lunch at the Smorgasbord, which is a buffet type of
right.
Place, and he used to love to go eat every Sunday. He'd always call, "We're going to go eat," and that's where we usually end up going.
Now, Charlie booked him as what? Charlie booked him as George the Giant, didn't he?
Right. And then we ended up, we went to Lexington, Kentucky up there for ICW at the Pompos.
Now, what year was that, Charlie? What year was that, Charlie? Oh my gosh, I got Charlie on the mind here. What year was that y'all went and worked for the Pompos up there in ICW?
I think that was about 82, 83. Me and Gene.
So that was between Mississippi and
right,
Oklahoma then.
Right. See, it was Gene and I. The one-man gang, which he worked as Crusher Broomfield up there.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
They liked him up there so good that they kept him up there.
Right.
And because the Papas really liked him, Randy and Lanny and their dad Angelo, they liked him, and they also liked Danny Doyle up there.
Right.
Because he had got their Rookie of the Year that time up there. And then, of course, Ronnie Garvin was up there, and
Ox Baker. I believe
yeah,
Ox was there.
There's guys like that, and which they had a good thing going up there. The Papas did. They had some top talent working in up there. I think Sir Oliver Humperdinck was up there at that time, also.
And you did you work up there for quite a while, or?
I worked up there for probably, I think, for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I come back to the Carolinas, or South Carolina at that time, and I had an opportunity. Man Mountain Link, Rick Link, the Beastmaster. He told me, says, won't you come down to Georgia Championship Wrestling? Said they're needing some guys. Said give them a call up. Said call Ron West or Colonel Buck Robley. So I give them a call, and we went. I got booked down there.
And that was what year? That was when you got back from ICW?
Yeah, it seemed like it was. It seemed like it's about I think about 81, 82, something like that. I know that on the internet now that you can buy some of those CDs, or they had them on there for one time for sale. But yeah, something like that. You know, Link went down there a lot,
right.
And then Link ended up out in Mid-South Wrestling out there with Jerry Lawler. And but you know, I cut my stay short up there in Lexington, Kentucky, and to come back to pursue that.
Right.
And which was, you know, I had an opportunity, and Gene used to tell me, he said, "Man, you left me. I said, "No, I didn't leave you." I said, "I tried to get you to come, but you wouldn't come." And we also did some stuff out in Nashville for Goulas, NWA, out there for Nick Goulas.
Right. So you've been all over. And when you went to Georgia, who was the booker down there?
The bookers were Ron West and Colonel Buck Robley.
And who were some of your most memorable opponents down there?
Well, the first one I had down there was World's Strongest Man at that time, which was Ken Patera.
Right.
And then Tommy Rich, Jan Madrid and myself, we worked the tag team together against the Rock and Roll Express, which everybody's heard of the Rock and Roll Express, if there's still any of that age now. And you know, the list goes on. I mean, they were...
who was down there at that time? Ted DiBiase was down there about that time?
Right, Junkyard Dog.
Yeah, J.Y.
Cy Ritter, yeah.
Now, he broke in with Powers, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Matter of fact, when I got down there, he was one of the guys come up to me, and he said, "Jim," and I turned around and looked, and it was Junkyard Dog, and I said, "Well," he says, "I'm glad to have you down here." He said, "You'll like it down here."
That's
awesome.
But
those guys were a good group of guys down there at that time. Ted DiBiase come up, you know, they was the type of guys that come up and introduce themselves. Anything we can do to help you, you know, we're here. Michael Hayes and the Freebirds, you know, some of them guys like that were down there, and they were a good group of guys.
All right. Okay, well, we've been talking here for about 50 minutes. I'm just gonna throw some names out there, and you say as little or as much as you want to about any of them. Bo and Danny Doyle, the Doyle brothers.
Real good guys. Bo Doyle is a retired major off the sheriff department in Morganton. Danny Doyle, I still talk to him. He's living in the Philippines with his wife over there. I think he has a child or two over there. I still talk to him. And he's supposed to be coming back to the States, and he said he'd like to get together and go out and have lunch somewhere. And I said that'd be good. You know, like I say, those were are real two good guys. They kept it clean. They don't have anything, no skeletons in their closets that we know of. I mean, of course, they were real good people.
Right. You worked a lot with them too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I worked a lot with them, learned a lot from them too.
Right. And how about the McGuire twins, Benny and Billy?
Benny, the McQuarrie twins. The McGuire twins are real good friends. I worked with them, against them several times. They were real good, but they were real good.
Were you on that card in Mount Airy that night when they jumped the 21 school buses that were Matchbox cars?
Yes. Charlie had all of us fooled, and I said, "There's no way where are these buses going to set up." He said, "You just watch." And they went out there on their motor scooters and jumped those. I think it had all the people. Some people, I think, got a little mad about it, but they jumped the school buses, but they didn't say what type of school buses.
Yeah, I remember that as a kid. I remember that show and everybody being ticked off because they set up and jumped Matchbox cars on their mini bikes. But how about Chief J. Eagle?
Chief J. Eagle, he's still doing wrestling, I think, in South Carolina. Jerry is I've always had a lot of respect for him. I've seen him come up. He used to be as skinny as a rail. If he listens to this, I don't mean nothing about Jerry, but Jerry's, he ended up down through the years meeting one of the NWA legends, Wahoo McDaniels, and hooked up with Wahoo and learned a great deal, I know, from Wahoo. And Jerry's a good person, too. I really think a lot of Jerry.
You worked with Jerry a bunch, too, didn't you, back
Oh, yes. Me and Jerry's had plenty of matches against each other. I've left out of a ring with my chest being so red, almost the blood ready to come dripping out with all those chops.
He was the one that sent me the stuff, the AWF stuff that I posted.
Right. Yeah. Jerry's he at that time he used to tape a lot of that stuff down, and he's probably got a pool of tapes, wrestling tapes. Man, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff he's probably got.
Yeah. How about Homer Odell? What do you remember about working with Homer?
Homer Odell at that time.
Before you do that, tell them about the beer story. Tell them the beer story.
Oh, we were doing. I had to go do some promos for wrestling in Greenville, South Carolina, at GGS TV 16. And that station was a religious station. They done a lot of the preaching and also telethons on there. It's about like your TBN channel now. And so I had to take Brute Bernard and Homer Odell with me and take them to the station to do the promos for an upcoming event. I think it was at Greenwood Civic Center. Well, I had a case of beer in the backseat of my car. Charlie said, "Do not let those guys get a hold of that beer at the TV station because we don't want the preacher that on that station. They don't need to see that because they'll run what we've got up here because they were running Charlie's show at that time." After we did the promos, Brute and Homer said, "We're going out to the car." I said, "Yeah, go ahead. It's unlocked." I didn't think nothing of it. And it was in the middle of summer and hot. Charlie said, "Where's Brute and Homer Odell?" I said, "They went out to the car." He said, "I hope you got that cooler locked up in your trunk." I said, "No, it's in the back seat." So we went out there and right out the picnic tables that they had sitting outside the TV station at the main entrance, Homer Odell and Brute Bernard sitting out there drinking beer. I thought Charlie was going to have a heart attack. And Charlie said, "Put those beers up because we're at this station is a religious station." And Homer Odell said, "My goodness, Charlie, it's just a little old cold beer." And Charlie had a fit.
You worked with Homer quite a bit too, didn't you? Right.
They had stuck Hollywood John Tatum and myself together as a tag team, again trying something new, along with Homer Odell as our manager. And they shot some angles off from that, which worked pretty good where they turned Homer and Hollywood John Tatum against me, and I had to work Homer in a match, one of the main events in Johnson City one night.
That's awesome. Homer was kind of crazy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was a case. I'm gonna tell you, he was a case.
How about Louis Martinez?
Louis Martinez, the Reba kid, he was another good one. He was a health fanatic. He believed in eating right, exercising, and he would jog about 5 miles every morning. He'd be up bright and early. We're sitting at the restaurant that was on the beach at Virginia Beach one Saturday morning because we had to work the pavilion that night, and he was out there. We was in there at 6 o'clock, and he'd been out there jogging up and down the beach. You could see him out there. He's just jogging away. He was a health fanatic. He believed in exercising and keeping in good shape.
He kept a case of beer under his bed.
Right. But he was, he always worked it off, but he was real good.
Right.
And he was also a real good teacher. He gave me a lot of good advice and showed me a lot of good things to help me out.
Tell me about Eddie Dean.
Yeah, Blind Eddie Dean. Eddie Dean was real young at the time, like the rest of us, and I think Eddie Dean was really a way ahead of his time as far as wrestling, because that guy was something else when it comes to performing in a ring. He could take some of the bumps. Any normal person would probably break an arm or something like that, but he was really good and get up for drop kicks, which there's not too many people that does things like that anymore. He was real super. Last I heard from Eddie, he was doing some type of a midget basketball.
Yeah. Once a promoter, always a promoter, right?
Right.
How about Trevor Phillips?
Trevor Phillips, God rest his soul, he got into, he was a fellow that was sort of a know-it-all. I've had run-ins with him a couple of different times. Starting off when he was being trained, he was all right, but when he got the big head after the first couple of matches and thought he knew everything, and then he got involved with got on some type of drug and got away from the wrestling and got into a bad drug deal, and somebody shot him.
Oh, man. And
ended his young age, before he even got the prime of his life.
How about working outlaw shows in Kentucky for Mike Padunovac? Steve Padunovac. Steve, that's right.
Steve was a good person. He taped some TV up there and had some good houses. Doing live TV taping at that time was something new. And some of the outlaw shows or independent shows were some of the first ones really in the area to start trying something like that. They figured, well, put it on the advertising, come see yourself on TV. The TV, is going to be here taping. And you got a big production crew out there. People come and see that thinking, well, we're going to see ourselves on TV, or we might see ourselves on TV. And it was a good draw. Steve was real good business-minded. He would promote a show real good. Sometimes he would draw good, sometimes he wouldn't. But he was a real good person.
How about Flying Phil Watson?
Flying Phil Watson. I wasn't around him too much, but Phil was he was a super worker and a super guy. He, from what I can remember of him at the time I was around him, was a real good person.
How about Stonewall Jackson, Steve Muslin? Were you around him any at all?
Very little, Ben, very little.
All right. Is there anybody else, any more colorful characters you want to bring up before we bring this to an end? Anybody that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
Well, not at this time. We talk about a lot, and there's more that probably when we get through with this, it'll pop up and I remember, and I'll have to jot it down.
Oh, I just remembered one. Playboy Barry Hill. You got to tell me about Playboy Barry.
Playboy Barry Hill was a strange character. His elevator didn't go all the way up to the top. He was all the time trying to put the make on a lot of the guys, and a lot of times the type of make that he hoping he would get, was usually a fist in the mouth. Everybody called him, I had a nickname for him, called him Old Horse Lips.
Horse Lips.
Yeah, but now, give the devil his due, Playboy was a good manager.
Right.
But he had one fault, too, and that was his style of living. And a lot of the guys at that time didn't take to it, but, you know, he was a good manager.
Playboy Barry Hill. How about the Golden Gladiator?
Golden Gladiator, Buddy Porter.
Buddy Porter.
Good fella. He'd been up and down the road a lot of times, and we'd work some matches. One of the first matches I got to work with him was in a tag team, and that was up against Samson, the Wonder Bear.
Right.
And but Buddy was real good. He was also a good person, but you know, when it came to wrestling, he took his wrestling serious, and he was a real good person. Also, a lot of these guys were real good people then. I mean, a lot of them would, you know, if they had $1 and you needed 50 cents, they would give you 50 cents. That's the way it used to be. You took care of each other.
Did you ever have any memory of being around Von Hess or Von Stroheim in '76
no,
when they were
really.
at the IWA, or Hartford Love, or?
I was just a little of Hartford Love, but you know, but not enough really to
know them. Yeah.
Yeah, to know them.
Right. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it, Jim, and I'm sure people are going to enjoy listening to it, and we will. I'm sure I'm going to think of some things that I should have asked you that I didn't. And so we'll do it again at some point, but I really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it myself. It brings a lot of memories back, and like I say, when I get off the phone, I'll probably remember this and that. You know,
I want everybody to know too that we're going to try to get the Tucker brothers together.
Right, we're working on that now. I spoke to Larry and Gene myself, and you know, we've been talking about that, and also Tommy Fuller. Tommy's been in some bad health and everything, but I think he's getting along better now. But you know, we're working on that right now, and that'll be a real treat too, because you get those guys, Larry and Gene together, you're in for a real treat, because you know there's no holes barred there when you get those two together. Well,
you know, it's good, and it's like I told you, if you know, a lot of these guys, you know, they weren't WrestleMania names, and but they traveled a lot, they did a lot, they saw a lot, and, you know, and unfortunately, you know, as we're all getting older, if somebody don't tell the tale will be gone.
That's exactly right, and it's too bad that wrestling is no more. I mean, I have to say that because the wrestling you have now today is not like it used to be. No. And we come up through the golden years of wrestling, and that's my opinion. And there never will be no more wrestling like it used to be. Everybody's trying this new thing, and you know, where you get out there and you talk a high power when you open up the show before any matches start, you know, that's no good. People want to see some action. They want to see some. There's some people out there want to see the old wrestling, and but it's not out there. And the only thing that we've got to remember it by is DVDs that's still out there, and guys that's still walking around that used to participate in it. And you know, that's the golden years. And I'm just glad. Thank the good Lord above that I had the opportunity to come up in that time.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to turn this thing off. I just saw it on my list here as you were talking, but tell everybody. I know you worked down in Georgia Championship Wrestling, but tell everybody what your typical week was like, and the type of money that was made working for Georgia Championship Wrestling. What did you say? 82, 83?
Yeah, usually Georgia Championship Wrestling would do a 2-hour taping on Saturday morning from 9 until 11, which would be shown that evening at 5 o'clock. If you worked both hours, you got $25 an hour.
Right.
And then a lot of times they'd send you down to Columbus, Georgia. You had to hurry up and leave. A lot of times you had to leave your gear on to get down there, because it'd take you about an hour to get down there from 11 o'clock down there, because they did 12 o'clock.
Right.
and you got paid $50 down there, and you could earn $100 right there if you did the TVs.
Right.
And then, depending on where they send you to a house shop, either down toward Moultrie, Georgia, or somewhere around there, you usually got maybe $100. So you can make $200 easy in a day's time. On the average, now, I'm not saying I was a superstar. Don't claim to be no superstar. Your superstars are guys like Blair and Ted DiBiase, one-man gang. But guys like us, it wasn't nothing for us to pull down $500 and $600 usually on 3 nights.
Right.
And at that time was pretty decent money. A lot of people wasn't even making that in a week, on a 40-hour week. And you'd be booked sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week. If we hit the road and had to go a long distance, I know one time I was gone for 2 weeks, come home on a Sunday, stayed Sunday and Monday home, and had to turn right around and hit the road to be back